About common.
Yeah.
Common.
Well, common's based here, production.
Common. Yeah, growing up, I was a common. Back then in the old days when they had the governors, the toshes, and the aristocrats. But as an American, you were automatically common. So I was very glad about that. It's taken me years to try to understand what is the commons. And they say the common council. But you go into the churches and you pay different money, you know, for how close you can be to the pulpit. You pay money for what kind of pillows you can sit on. Do you follow me? In other words, the Lord's mansions here were class-ridden. Remember how we began back there with the Lord, the earth belongs to the Lord and the fullness thereof. We know now from our global movement that it belongs to us. We are the commons that they're talking. When Jared Winstanley, well, I mentioned that, said the earth is a common treasury for all. These churches helped prevent that. The capitalists have their commons. Do you follow? We were at Lombard Street, the Italians, the Jews, the Russians. There are capitalists and traders all over who forget their nationality for their trading. The crisis, the financial crisis, we know they are trying to sort out amongst themselves, and money is the way they try to calculate it. Credit and debt is a relationship of trust within the ruling class. Yes. When that trust fails, it falls apart, and money ceases to be that token of equality by which the ruling class organizes its commons. Now, how are we going to organize our commons? This is what we're thinking about. And here in the city of London, this thought occurred earlier in 1780, and I think Mark asked me to just say one quick word about insurrection in 1780 that was heard around the world, and surely bodes important, is important for the Bank of England, because then an alliance of commoners throughout London, led by African Americans, Ben Bowsey, for example, came into the city of London and attempted to enter the bank and to find the gold in the bank. This was the Gordon riots. And as a result, terror befell the common people of London. 500 were killed in street battles. The Bank of England was protected by John Wilkes, and it developed its own police force, a yeomanry. They were barracked in Westminster, and every evening they'd march back and forth ever afterwards. And the bank still has this. You know, they might have lovely uniforms and a banquet every year, but they are still on guard. The other thing at the Gordon riots of 1780, besides the 500 killed in the insurrection, besides the permanent armed forces around the bank, the other thing was the hangings. They were not just at Tyburn. They wished to disperse the hangings. Chris asked us, neighborhood by neighborhood, to have block parties. The ruling class in 1780, neighborhood by neighborhood, had hangings. We must answer them, and Chris is helping us to figure out how.
May I say something? The symbolism of the defence, the complicity of the Christians in their defence of property is right behind us on these fences. This fence, this railing is topped by spears. That's not an accident, they're meant to be there, and you will find very often that property is defended by a defensible steel boundary like this, topped with symbolic spears.
Is there anybody? Hey, look, Fabian, 1682, financial capitalism, and it's a clock ticking away the minutes of our lives that they hope to appropriate.
It's the wrong kind of clock. No clock but the sun and the moon.
Right, well, one of the things walking up here is that actually there's lots of really nice little places dotted around the city of London, and there's also lots of little alleys and ways you can get through which aren't on the main road, and you can get away from the traffic. And to me, living in a city could be a much more pleasurable experience if it wasn't dominated by capitalism, if the buildings that we see around us weren't built just, you just need to look at them all there, and it's all geared around work really, and this kind of more is given over to the motor car than to the human being and moving around. So it's like at the moment it's a bit of a challenge to find the kind of really pleasant ways of moving through a city. But one of the things when we are setting about changing this world, one of the things that I feel has to be pretty high up on the agenda is how to make the cities that we live in more pleasurable places for everyone who has the opportunity to visit them.
Reclaim the streets, kill the car.
Well, I think most people. Yeah, no, it's not fun. I only ever do it when I'm like. Well, street battles up and down here last time I was here.
Any walk around London, to my mind, wouldn't be really complete unless you come down by the river. Because really, the river is key to understanding why London exists in the first place. And what happened was that London was the lowest place that you could cross from the north of England, particularly going down towards Dover, and so it became, right from the beginning, a big port. So it developed as a port, and the river was there to develop it as a port. And for a certain period of time, London was actually the largest port in the world. And you know, we've seen about how the imperial ambitions of London developed was all based on being a maritime trading empire. That was how it was built up. And so the river and the people who worked on the river and the seamen who sailed out across from the river and went across the world, they were an intrinsic part of it. And they always played a they always played a very alarming part in the role of class struggle. The word strike comes from the sailors when they took the sails down and refused to sail. And also, we must also remember the seamen were one of the major ways in which information got spread by the working class internationally. The seamen would be going from port to port to port, and they would be giving first-hand accounts of what happened in the various places they visited. You know, when there was a revolt, it was often the seamen who became the people who would tell in the taverns to anybody who cared to listen exactly what had been happening. So the river is kind of always a strong part of really understanding what London's about. Okay, we're going to move along this way a little bit now.
Can I add something?